Scotland didn't invent its legends. The land did. You've seen the castles in films, the misty Highlands in postcards, the lochs that stretch like dark mirrors into infinity. But here's what no one tells you. Every Scottish legend you've ever heard, every ghost, every warrior, every curse wasn't written by poets sitting in warm libraries. They were carved by the wilderness itself, forged in stone and storm. However, the wildness you see today, it's tame compared to what the first Gaels encountered. And the stories they told weren't entertainment, they were survival manuals disguised as myths. I'm bringing you into the ancient Scottish landscape, where mythology wasn't created, it emerged. This is the first video in a series that will take you deep into Scotland's legendary castles, its blood-soaked battlefields, and the places where history and myth blur so completely that even historians can't tell them apart. But before we storm any castle gates, you need to understand something crucial. Scottish legends didn't make sense without knowing the land that birthed them. The geography isn't just a backdrop, it's a character. Sometimes, it's the villain. Picture this. You're standing in the Scottish Highlands around 500 CE. There are no roads, no villages visible for miles, just you, and mountains that look like sleeping gods. And a silence so complete it feels like the earth is holding its breath. Then the mist rolls in. It doesn't drift like morning fog. It surges like a living thing, swallowing entire valleys in seconds. One moment, you can see the path ahead. The next, you can't see your own feet. The temperature drops, shapes move in the white, and your perfectly rational mind, starts filling the emptiness with explanations. That's where the Gaelic is born. The Gaelic, the divine hag, the storm goddess, wasn't some invention of creative storytelling. She was the personification of experiencing Scottish winter without shelter, without maps, without any guarantee you'd see spring. When you're lost in a Highland blizzard and the wind sounds like screaming, you're not meeting a metaphor. You're meeting the Gaelic. The early Gaels understood something we've forgotten. Nature at that scale doesn't care about you. Therefore, you need stories that help you respect it, fear it, and survive it. Scottish lochs aren't like other lakes. Loch Ness is 755 feet deep. Loch Morar reaches 1,017 feet. That's deeper than most of the North Sea. And unlike oceans, which reveal themselves through waves and tides, lochs sit still, black, impenetrable. You stand at the edge of Loch Ness on a gray morning, and you are looking at a body of water that contains more liquid than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. You can't see the bottom. You can't see what's moving beneath. You just see darkness reflecting sky. Of course, you fill that darkness with monsters. The first recorded sighting of the Loch Ness monster was in 565 CE, when Saint Columba allegedly saved a man from a water beast. That's 1,400 years of consistent reports. Not because there's necessarily a prehistoric creature down there, but because when you live beside that much dark water, your brain cannot accept that it's empty. The Kelpies understood this perfectly. Kelpies were shape-shifting water horses that appeared as beautiful steeds to tired travelers. You'd climb on, and they'd plunge into the water and drown you. Gruesome? Absolutely. But also incredibly practical. These stories kept children away from dangerous water and made adults cautious around riverbanks where one slip meant death. The Kelpie wasn't a monster story, it was a public health campaign wrapped in nightmare fuel. The Scottish landscape has over 280 mountains higher than 3,000 feet. The Gaels gave them individual names, individual personalities, individual spirits. Ben Nevis, Britain's tallest peak, at 4,413 feet, was considered the throne of the Gaelic during winter. Eilean was supposedly hollow, filled with the East, the fairy folk who could bless you with fortune or curse you with madness. If you're a Gaelic farmer in 800 CE and you watch clouds gather around a peak, watch lightning strike the summit, watch avalanches obliterate everything in their path, that mountain is acting with intent. It's displaying power. Therefore, it has a will. Therefore, you should probably leave offerings and show respect. This is how mythology emerges from geography. You don't invent stories about mountain spirits. You experience mountains as powerful, unpredictable, occasionally deadly forces, and you create frameworks to understand that power. Scottish mist doesn't respect boundaries. It can roll in from the sea within minutes, dropping visibility to zero. It muffles sound, distorts distance, and plays tricks with light. In that mist, your brain goes into overdrive. You start seeing things, hearing things. A boulder becomes a giant. A deer becomes a ghost. A gnarled tree becomes a witch. The owls as the fairy folk were said to inhabit the thin places between worlds. And you know what creates liminal spaces better than anything? Mist. Fog. That gray zone where you can't trust your senses. The Gaels weren't being superstitious when they left offerings at fairy rings. They were responding rationally to an environment that regularly made them question reality. Better to respect the owls than to end up lost in the mist forever in actual danger that killed actual people. The Gaels arrived in Scotland around 500 CE from Ireland, but the Picts were already there, mysterious, tattooed, fierce, and they'd been there for 1,000 years. We know almost nothing certain about Pictish mythology because they didn't write it down. They carved it into stones instead, elaborate symbols, strange beasts, geometric patterns. When the Gaels encountered these carvings in the wild, surrounded by nothing but wind and stone, what were they supposed to think? Obviously, these were made by magical beings. The Picts became legends while they were still alive. Their real culture, real language, real beliefs all lost. But their reputation? Immortal. The Gaels absorbed the Picts through intermarriage and story, and suddenly Pictish warriors became supernatural warriors. Pictish queens became fairy queens. This is how mythology works. It is cultural memory distorted by time, and the impossibility of preserving accurate information when you don't have writing. Every Scottish legend contains practical survival information. The Celtic seal people who could shed their skins taught coastal communities about the dangers of the sea. If you disrespect the sea takes you. The Redcaps, murderous goblins in castle ruins who dyed their caps in human blood, kept people away from structurally unsound buildings. Don't explore that crumbling tower. Redcaps live there. They'll kill you. And honestly, yes, collapsing stone will kill you. So the warning worked perfectly. The banshee's scream foretold death, but what she really represents is the sound of grief. In a culture where emotional suppression was necessary for survival, having a supernatural outlet for grief was psychologically crucial. Everything I've just told you, the mist, the mountains, the lochs, the myths, is the foundation for understanding Scottish castles. Scottish castles weren't built in spite of this landscape. They were built because of it. They grew from the same stone, the same need to survive, the same understanding that Scotland will kill you if you don't respect it. When we explore Stirling Castle in the next video, you'll see how it controlled the crossing between Highlands and Lowlands, how 16 different sieges scarred its walls. But you will also understand why ancient Britons built fortifications there long before any castle existed, because the land itself demands defense. When we walk through Eilean Donan Castle, you'll learn about Jacobite risings and the MacRae clan's fierce loyalty. But you'll also feel why a castle on an island, surrounded by lochs, backed by mountains, seems like it was grown rather than built. When we stand before Edinburgh Castle on its volcanic rock, you'll hear about Mary, Queen of Scots, and the Stone of Destiny. But you'll also understand why ancient people thought that rock was sacred, why the castle feels less like a military installation and more like a monument to the land's power. Scottish legends aren't separate from Scottish history. They're the same thing, seen from different angles. The wilderness created the myths created the culture created the castles, and the castles became legends themselves, accumulating ghost stories and battle scars, until you can't tell where history ends and mythology begins. That's exactly where we're going. In this series, you're going to walk through castles where actual historical figures made actual historical decisions that changed Britain forever, and also where headless pipers still play in the dungeons and green ladies walk through walls. You'll learn about real sieges, real betrayals, real murders, and rebellions. But you'll also learn about curses that supposedly still hold power, about treasures that remain hidden, about mysteries that historians argue about and locals just accept. But because Scotland doesn't let you separate the rational from the legendary, the land won't let you. And after today, neither will you. You'll see Scotland the way the Gaels saw it, as a place where every stone has a story, every loch has a secret, and every mist might hide something that changes everything. The wilderness created the legends. Now, let's explore the castles where those legends came to life and sometimes refused to die. Welcome to the birth of Scottish legends. This is just the beginning.